The big pre-Thanksgiving weekend is here, and the battle of the box office has commenced. It is a test of might versus flight. And of course, we're talking about Gladiator 2 versus Wicked. Now, we're going to give you all the information that you need, what these movies have done so far this weekend at the box office, the differences between the two, what these movies cost to produce, and what kind of money they need to make at the retail level at the box office just to even think about breaking even. These are some high hurdles, both for the adapted Broadway musical and the sequel to Ridley Scott's Oscar award-winning Gladiator from nearly 25 years ago. Let's get into it. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many watching this video not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Make sure to join us every Sunday and Wednesday afternoon right here for the live show on the Renegade Nation. So according to Deadline Magazine's Anthony D'Alessandro, this is the best pre-Thanksgiving frame in nearly 11 years, with Wicked and Gladiator 2 racking up a combined total of a little over $200 million for the domestic box office. That's the U.S. and Canada so far, at least by estimates this weekend. Two of the most anticipated tentpoles of this year missed their projections, but are still rich enough to make exhibition happy, in which driving an overall $205 million weekend. Box office research analytics firm Intelligence says that a combined 12 million people bought tickets to see Wicked and Gladiator 2, representing 81% of the weekend's foot traffic. Everyone relish it. That's on par with the pre-Thanksgiving frame of 2019, when Frozen 2 drove all titles to $204.9 million. It's the biggest since 2013, when Lionsgate: The Hunger Games: Catching Fire drove all titles to $226.5 million. Hands down, the biggest pre-Thanksgiving post-pandemic. What we can't ignore is the counter-programming of the two respective tentpoles, one aimed at women and one at men. Does work. Both Universal and Paramount promoted these titles to the sky with expensive stunts. For example, Wicked's lighting up the Arc de Triomphe in Paris with pink and green, and Gladiator 2, faux coliseums on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, bus stops in front of the TCL Chinese Theater as well. Splitting it up, Universal's Wicked opened to $114 million. Again, folks, these are estimates. These are not final numbers. We're not going to get those final tallies until at least Monday afternoon, perhaps Tuesday morning. They could be slightly higher or lower depending on audience drive, but as it seems right now that Wicked's box office this weekend is a little bit underperforming some of the estimates going in, I would suspect those numbers might be slightly high in that case. Gladiator 2, however, only did $55.5 million on the same weekend, so clearly Wicked ran away with it. And worldwide, Wicked opens with $162.4 million. That's the biggest ever opening around the globe for a Broadway feature adaptation, exceeding even Les Mis for $103 million. Now, bear in mind, it's been quite a few years since the Les Mis adaptation came out, and movie ticket prices have radically inflated along with pretty much everything else out there in the world since then. So if we were to actually adjust that box office for Les Mis, it actually would look fairly similar, perhaps even a little bit bigger than Wicked, because we've had really almost 40% ticket price inflation alone just since the pandemic crossed our thresholds. But to be clear, right now, Gladiator 2 is still technically in the lead insofar as global haul, but there's a caveat to this, of course. Gladiator 2 currently at $221 million, with the estimates going through the end of business today on Sunday as I record this, a little bit before 1 o'clock Central Standard Time, U.S. But Gladiator 2, of note, has something going for it here that Wicked doesn't. And if we scroll over to the international, I can show you exactly what I'm talking about. The release date for Gladiator 2 in quite a few major international markets, especially in Western Europe, Well, it's been out now for 10 days. Yeah, Gladiator 2 released last weekend in many places around the globe, just opened this weekend here in the U.S., so it's got a 7-day lead in the international markets. Not all of them, but many of the major ones. A 7-day lead versus Wicked. So if we go pound for pound right now between Gladiator 2 and Wicked, Wicked technically is really leading even in the international side if we adjust for the extra amount of time that the Ridley Scott sequel has been out. And if we look here at Wicked, clearly, so far, it's a much bigger hit domestically than it is internationally. $164 million, with only about $50 million of that coming from overseas. And if we look at the international markets that are leading the way, no surprise, it's the United Kingdom with about $17.6 million. But do pay attention to a few things. There are a number of markets out there, although not a whole lot of them that are serious major markets, but some that have not even opened yet. And many of these international markets are not opening until, in some cases, next weekend. Look at Denmark, look at Finland, look at France. It's not even out in France until the 4th of December. Not out in Japan until December 31st, New Year's Eve here in the States. And we have a lot of others out there that are still yet to open. So we're going to have to wait and see on this one. But of course, we've got a bit of an interesting variance here with Wicked versus Gladiator 2. And also, take note of China not opening until December 6th. Now, talking about budgets between these two films, the easier of the two to explain to see what these movies need to make to hit their mark and just break even before they actually start turning a profit is really Gladiator. So let's start here. About 8 months ago, right on the money almost, from The Hollywood Reporter, Rambling round up Ridley Scott's very expensive Roman holiday. Now, we're looking at this one because we've actually got some production budget and cost information here. And I want to remind folks, we always talk about the difference of a production budget is simply what a studio would, at least in this case, publicly state that they intend to spend or intended to spend to produce a certain film or television project. But the actual costs at the end of the day can either come under budget or exceed the budget. And of course, in the case of Disney, which neither of these two films are, we've talked many times in the past how more often than not, those budgets are radically exceeded by the actual costs, making Disney movies much more difficult to actually turn a profit. Most haven't in the last several years. But here's the nitty-gritty from THR. With accidents on the set, complaints about animal abuse, and now reports that the production, this is Gladiator 2, went wildly over budget. Sources tell Rambling Reporter that Ridley Scott's long-anticipated Gladiator sequel is leaving Paramount executives feeling a bit like Joaquin Phoenix's Emperor Commodus, terribly vexed. Initially budgeted at $165 million, sources say that Gladiator 2's actual ultimate cost figure has ballooned to something closer to $310 million. Paramount insiders insist, however, the net cost of the 49-day shoot was under $250 million. All right, so let me explain what they're saying there. Originally, Paramount intended to spend $165 million for Ridley Scott's sequel. That didn't happen for one reason or another, and it exploded to nearly a $310 million. That's almost 2 times as much as what Paramount originally allocated to shoot this film. $165 to $310 million because of issues on set, production hell, whatever the case may be. That is an enormous cost overrun. But when they say that the net cost is closer to $250 million, what Paramount is suggesting is that they got about $60 million or so back in what is likely film tax credits. So you hear us talk all the time about how places like the United Kingdom, if things are filmed over there, have up to a 25% film tax credit they return to the production entity for eligible costs. Not every cost is eligible. For example, with Gladiator 2, paying Pedro Pascal or Denzel Washington wouldn't be included in that eligible film tax credit. Neither would Ridley Scott's fee. But a lot of the other guys out there, extras, British labor in that case, and the same thing holds true if this movie were to have been shot in, say, Atlanta, Georgia, or even Los Angeles, California. Most of these places have similar film tax credits to the UK, although generally not as lucrative, which is why many film production companies that can do it will go over there and shoot at places like Pinewood or Shinfield Studios outside of London. But let's take Paramount at their word and say the net costs came back at around $250 million. And let's say that they probably easily spent another $100 million, probably more, just marketing this film, meaning buying advertising and putting things on social media, trailers before other movies, television commercials, things of that nature. Let's say it's between $350 and $400 million all in costs between production and marketing. That would mean that Gladiator 2 is going to have to strike the box office for somewhere around $750 to $800 million just to be able to break even, meaning to recover all of the money they spent, since once again, on average, theaters keep about half of the movie ticket price, and the other half goes back to, in this case, Paramount. So in the U.S., they get a little bit more than internationally. On a movie like this, probably closer to 55%. This is according to data that we have observed from places like AMC theaters and their financial reporting that they have to publicly put out every 3 months. Internationally, they tend to get back more around 43%, again, on average, and that is ex-China, meaning China has a different schedule altogether. China is very unique. China only sends back between 20 and 25% of the box office to the American distributor because communism. Now, Wicked, on the other hand, is a different story and a little bit more convoluted because this is a two-parter, and this movie was filmed basically all at one time. And according to sources out there, the total cost for Wicked's Part 1 and Part 2 came in at around $350 million. Now, it sounds like, okay, that's not that much more than Gladiator, but then again, this is actually going to be two films, but that brings more complexities around it. $350 million for a two-parter that was shot concurrently is not wildly terrible, although it is still very, very expensive for a film like this. And I suspect that price tag is likely going to rise because the studio would be hard at work right now finishing all of the post-production for Part 2 that's going to come out in the future, I think maybe 1 year from now. So that cost is probably going to continue to climb, might get closer to $400 million. And then, of course, you're going to have two marketing spends on a movie like this. They're going to have to spend at least $100 million right now to promote the first Wicked movie that's out in theaters, and probably another $100 million, again, likely even more, next year when the second part comes out. So instead of having, say, a $100 million production budget as a baseline in the case of Wicked, it's probably going to get closer to $200 million. So really determining the success of Wicked is going to be largely deferred because we're going to have to wait for the second movie to come out to see how it plays. But let's just do the simple math. As of right now, if they've spent $350 million, they've spent another at least $100 million, probably a good bit more, probably closer to $150. But let's say all in, right now, they're sitting somewhere close to $450 to $500 million. If the first Wicked movie manages to crack $1 billion at the box office and settle right there, that means that, well, the studio would have covered all of its costs of production and marketing, at least marketing for the first film, and the second movie could potentially be entirely gravy. Profit for them. And that's a pretty tall order, but musicals like this certainly have the chops to leg out. And as we get into the Thanksgiving holiday here this week, a lot of folks that may have otherwise gone to see this movie on its opening weekend could have potentially deferred it into, say, tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And of course, Black Friday is usually a pretty good day at movie theaters as well. And of course, the second weekend. We're really going to need to see how these movies hit during the Thanksgiving week, how they leg out, especially what their holds are going to be in the second weekend compared to the first. So stay tuned right here. We'll keep you up to date on this. Appreciate everybody watching. Let me know if you're interested in these movies, if you're going to check out Gladiator 2 or Wicked, or if you have. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Make sure to join us this afternoon at 6 p.m. Eastern right here for the live show. We've got a lot to discuss with a lot of great guests. Hope to see you there. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.